Chapter 13 Fear the Reaper. The fire crackled low, embers flaring like old memories refusing to die. The camp was still. Everyone had stopped what they were doing. Ghouls, mutants, scouts, and guards alike gathered in a loose circle around Johnny as he sat, one hand resting on his knee, the other flicking idle sparks from the LC-01's reactor valve. The glow from his eyes dimmed just enough to let the shadows breathe around him. And then, he spoke. The bunker was real. Not just a vault or hideout. A place the enclave built before the bombs even fell. He glanced up at Milo, Elias, Craig, all listening now without a word. They'd been watching me. Or, watching something like me. For years. They had files, logs, surveillance footage going back before the war, dozens of reports from across the East Coast. All the same story. He leaned forward, voice level but heavy. A man always appears before disaster. Always survives. Always wins. They said. His eyes glowed. They looked shaken. But how could that be possible? Johnny didn't flinch. Because it wasn't just one man. He raised his wrist, letting the device project a shimmer of data into the air, just enough to show it wasn't from this world. Or maybe it was. Just not this version of it. There are others. Versions of me. From other timelines. Other realities. I don't know how many. I don't know what they've done. But I know this. He paused. We're connected. Somehow. I've felt it ever since the vault. Since the hive tried to rewrite me and failed. Craig crossed his arms, frowning. You're saying the experiment didn't make you like this? Johnny shook his head. No. That's what they didn't know. That's why the others, those kids, they died. The experiment was trying to recreate something that already existed. It didn't give me these abilities. It just woke them up. He looked back at Elias now. They found a body. One of me. Dead. From where? I don't know. Could have been another timeline, another war. They tried to reverse engineer the device he carried. This. He raised his wrist. They couldn't. They couldn't understand it. Couldn't recreate it. So they went with Vault Tech. Project Luminary. Random kids. Random chances. Trying to get lucky. Milo squinted. So what? You're some kind of, what? Multiversal wanderer. Johnny chuckled once. No humor in it. No. I'm the mistake that worked. He stood now, slow and steady, the fire casting light across his armor, his face, the device glowing faint. And now I know what I am. I know how I survived. Why I see what I see. Why nothing makes sense until I'm standing in the middle of it. He turned toward the capital's direction, far beyond the ridge. And I know how to find them. Elias stepped closer. The enclave. Johnny nodded once. They scattered. Went dark. Whatever branch was in that bunker was long gone, but they left enough behind. Enough for me to follow. He looked to the fire, and then to every face around him. I have something they'll never understand. I don't fight for the past. I don't worship the old world. I don't want to rebuild what broke. I fight for Lancaster. For now. For what comes next. He held up the device. And with this, the playing field's leveled. They think they built monsters to survive the apocalypse. But I am the ghost of everyone they couldn't control. The fire popped. The wind blew soft. And the camp silent, grounded, real knew what it meant to follow a man who remembered futures that hadn't happened yet. Not a soldier. Not a savior. But something else entirely. Johnny Vanjik. Call sign, Ghost. Status, active. Johnny stood over the map table, an old scrap of rusted steel welded into a flat surface, covered in parchment, recon sketches, and blood-stained grid overlays. The device on his wrist pulsed steadily now, like it was breathing in rhythm with his thoughts. Around him, Milo, Crag, Elias, the ghouls and mutants of the forward camp. Survivors. Soldiers. Family, whether they knew it or not. He pointed to the device, speaking slow and sure. This thing, the call sign, it doesn't operate off coordinates like a teleport beacon. It runs on memory. On history. The more we know about something, its origin, its weight in the world, the more real it becomes to the system. It's not about where something is. It's about what it means. He tapped the side of the holographic display as it rippled again. If the enclave is real, if they're still operating, this device already knows where they are. He took a breath. And it showed me. He turned toward the east, toward the wind that still carried salt even this far inland. They're not on land. They've been hiding offshore a handful of miles into the Atlantic. Milo blinked. Offshore? Like a boat? A sub? Johnny shook his head. No. Bigger. Older. Back before the bombs, when the government still thought they'd find oil in the Atlantic, they built a massive oil rig. When the fuel dried up, they repurposed it into something else. He paused, letting the weight of it settle in. A survival outpost. Their most advanced pre-war fallback base. Fully independent systems. Black site clearance. Designed to operate off-grid for decades. Elias stepped forward, brow furrowed. We've been searching land routes, vaults, bunkers. But if they're out there... Johnny nodded. That's why we couldn't find them. No matter how hard we looked. They weren't on the map. Crag grunted, dragging a clawed finger across the rusted edge of the table. And you can get there. Johnny glanced at the device. I can. The call sign can transport me there. The memory's strong enough. The history's loud enough. He looked around the room, slower now. But it can't take all of us. Not at once. Not with your signatures. It's tied to me. My echoes. Which means we need another way. He turned back to the table and slammed his palm down, flat against an old nautical map someone had scavenged weeks ago. We need a pre-war Navy vessel. Something hardened. Something big. Something we can retrofit. Milo stepped up beside him, arms crossed. There's a half-sunk destroyer near the Jersey coast. Brotherhood tried to get it running 2 decades ago, but the tech was too old and the crew didn't last long enough to finish the job. Craig's eyes lit. You think we can fix it? Johnny looked at the device again. Then at the group. We have to. He stood tall, the glow from his eyes casting faint light across the iron map surface. We go home. We rebuild. We put out feelers. Salvagers. Old world whisperers. Brotherhood remnants. I want every radar dish and radio scanner across the east ringing. We find that ship. We get it running. And then we set sail. He pointed eastward. Because the enclave thinks they're safe behind salt water and steel. He clenched a fist. But I'm coming. And I don't give a damn if it's land, sea, or goddamn orbit. I'm dragging them into the light. The camp didn't cheer. Didn't shout. They just nodded. Because when Johnny Vanjik said he was going to war, he meant it. Johnny stood at the edge of the bluff, the rising sun bleeding red and gold over the cracked horizon, casting long shadows behind the ruins of the forward camp. The LC-01 shimmered with soft heat, the call sign device dim now, like a fire waiting for fuel. His breath was low. Calm. Focused. Below him, the others were packing up. Milo secured the last of the weapons crates. Craig oversaw the dismantling of the generator array. The ghouls were loading rations into the APC with that quiet, ritual precision that only survivors ever really learn. He turned to them, the core crew who had followed him into the jaws of DC and stood by his side as the ghosts of the old world tried to rewrite history yet again. He raised his wrist slightly, letting the faint blue hue of the call sign flicker for a second, just enough to remind them. And then his voice cut through the dawn. What we saw, what we found. He paused, making sure every eye was on him. We bring that back to Lancaster. We tell them everything. The enclave. The bunker. The rig. We warn them. We prepare them. He turned to Milo, then Elias. But this. He lifted his wrist, and the call sign flared just slightly, an echo pulsing out like a memory ripple through broken time. This stays between us. His tone was sharp. Final. No scientists. No Brotherhood scribes. No scavvers hoping for a payday. If word gets out that I have access to this, we won't be fighting just the enclave. We'll be fighting everyone. Crag grunted in agreement. Too much power in one place draws all the wrong types. Milo just nodded once. No one needs to know what's on your wrist. Not yet. Johnny took one last look at the skyline behind them. The shattered dome of the Capitol in the far distance. The streets of DC now behind them. But the war ahead. He turned toward the waiting caravan. Let's head home. Lancaster needs to know what's coming. And we need to be ready when we go knock on hell's door. They moved out. The caravan rolled. And the wind carried whispers of a name that meant war, ghosts, and the last hope for a broken world. Vanjik. Still walking. Still watching. And now. He knew where to aim. They crested the hill just as the sun was setting behind Lancaster's battered skyline. Johnny slowed first. His boots sank into the soft ash that coated the old highway stretch, and for a moment, no one spoke. Not Milo. Not Crag. Not even the wind. Below them, Lancaster still stood. Scarred. Bruised. But unbroken. Smoke drifted from the west end where some of the industrial quarters had clearly been hit. Rooftops caved in, comm towers collapsed, blast craters in the old refinery yards. But the loom mill was still there. The water lines were intact. The forges still glowed. And the main walls, still up. But what truly caught their breath, what shocked them silent, were the bodies. Enclave. Dozens. Their black armor scorched, shattered, left crumpled across the city outskirts and main roads like someone had swatted down a fleet of metal locusts. Some were still half inside downed vertibirds, their engines twisted like scrap. Others were lined up at the wall head slumped, blood-dried black under broken visors. And among them, Lancaster survivors. Citizens. Mutants. Ghouls. Gathering wreckage. Salvaging gear and vehicles, dragging power packs and weapons from the wrecks with the practiced grit of a community used to building from fire. They reached the gates by nightfall. And when the guards recognized them, when the gate opened, they were met with silence at first. Then, a rush. People poured from alleys, homes, checkpoints. Mechanics, nurses, quartermasters, field scouts, teens with rebar spears, mutants in field armor. All of them gathering around the returnees like something sacred had walked home. They swarmed Johnny, Crag, and Milo, pressing in but not overwhelming. Just being there. Needing to see them. To believe. And from the rear of the crowd, a voice called out. We held. Brother Elias, armor stained with oil and plasma scoring, emerged from the militia command line with a tired grin and a bandage on his left arm. Barely, but we held. Johnny stepped forward, eyes scanning the street. He didn't see a victory parade. He saw survival. And he nodded once. They tracked us. That's the only explanation. The Enclave knew the three of us were gone. Figured they could hit the city hard while the core leadership was scattered. Milo grunted. Cowards. They thought we'd folded. Crag cracked his knuckles. They forgot what happens when a wall doesn't fall the first time. Elias nodded grimly. They hit us 2 nights ago. Fast, hard. Dropships came in over the river. Power armor squads hit the outer markets. A few tanks breached the southern gate. But we were ready. He looked to the crowd now forming behind him, every age, every kind. We never stopped working. Never let up on drills. Ghouls and humans were tag-teaming barricade patrols. Mutants ran recovery ops like clockwork. And when they came through the wall, he pointed toward the towering wreck of an Enclave walker still smoldering in the eastern corridor. We made sure they didn't walk back out. Johnny looked around again. At the smoke. At the bodies. At the still standing heart of the only free city that mattered. And then, get the wounded sorted. Tally the losses, but focus on who's still breathing. I'll debrief you all soon. He turned to Elias, voice low but charged. The Enclave made a mistake. They showed their hand. And now, he glanced to the call sign on his wrist, still dark. Now we take the fight to them. The crowd had gathered again by nightfall, this time under purpose, not panic. Word had already spread through the city's veins like wildfire. Johnny Vanjik was back, and he came bearing not just news, but a warpath. In the loom mill courtyard, now scorched and blackened from the Enclave's failed assault, Johnny stood before Lancaster's leaders, commanders, survivors, and anyone strong enough to lift a weapon or carry a message. The call sign device was hidden beneath the armor now. That part of the plan? Locked down. Private. But the mission? Everyone would know. He stepped up onto the broken concrete pillar that had once been a sculpture base, his voice booming over the courtyard. The Enclave thought we were weak. They thought that if they waited until we were scattered, until our walls were thin and our leaders were away, they could break us. He turned slowly, eyes glowing faintly now in the low light. But what did they really do? They gave us a reason. They gave us clarity. And now they've signed their own damn death warrant. He motioned toward the map carved into the wall behind him, an old pre-war mural they'd retrofitted into a command reference. And then he pointed at the surrounding settlements. Lancaster is strong. But we're not alone. We can't be alone. If the Enclave was brave or arrogant enough to hit the superpower of the state, then they won't hesitate to pick off the rest. One by one. Piece by piece. He raised a fist. That ends tonight. He turned to the militia leaders, Brotherhood officers, and local mutant tacticians gathered near the fire pit. "I want squads out by morning." He began to list them. Columbia, Leeds, Holdwood, Paradise, Reading, Leola, E-Town, Mountjoy, Ephrata. Go to them. But don't stop there. Tell them to bring their own alliances, their own outposts. Any camps, bunkers, villages, or ruins flying a neutral flag or just trying to survive, bring them in. If they've got steel, food, clean water, guns, good. If they've only got hands and fire in their gut, that's good too. Cragg called out from the flank, voice low and sharp. You're not just building a force. You're building a nation. Johnny nodded. Not like the old world. This isn't flags and politics. This is survival. This is refuging. He looked across the crowd again. The Enclave will learn fear. Because for the first time since the world burned, the wasteland is uniting. And we're the hammer that's going to shape it. The silence that followed wasn't hesitation. It was gravity. The kind that hits right before the blood moves, the kind you feel in your chest when you realize history just pivoted. Then, a cheer. Loud. Real. Mutants, humans, ghouls, Brotherhood, farmers, scrappers, all shouting the same word. Lancaster. 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 Johnny stepped down from the pillar and looked to Elias, Milo, Cragg. We send them running once. Next time, they won't get to run at all. The campaign had begun. The wasteland was waking up. And the Enclave? They were about to learn what happened when you tried to bury the future. Only to dig up Johnny Vanjik instead. The following days felt like the wasteland itself began to stir. Not with violence. Not with war. With motion. With arrival. With the long overdue return of unity under skies that had known nothing but fallout and fire. From the western roads, down Old Route 30 and the Lancaster Pike came Leeds, Ephrata, Mountjoy, and Elizabethtown, arriving in convoys of reclaimed pre-war transports, armored wagons, and some even on foot. Their people brought trade goods, militias, skilled laborers, and more than a few homemade weapons that looked ugly but would absolutely work. Some bore banners faded, personal, made from tarp and thread, symbols of settlements that had survived on grit alone. From the north, Reading rolled in like a thundercloud, hundreds strong, marching under the symbol of a shattered book surrounded by flames. Their leaders had once been scholars. Now they were warlords of knowledge, tacticians, logisticians, hoarders of maps and blueprints. They brought libraries converted into command bunkers, chemists, and power armor salvaged from forgotten patrols. From the east, Paradise, Leola, and parts unknown filtered through the rail routes and old Amish backroads, some still on hoof-drawn carts retrofitted with steel plates and mounted guns. The people from that stretch had learned how to build when there was nothing left to build from. They brought machinists, grain stockpiles, and a stubborn refusal to die quietly. But then came the towns no one expected. From further east, Honeybrook caravanners and forge walkers who had developed steam-powered rail sleds to cross irradiated valleys. Intercorset's people quiet, stoic, and dangerously good with long-range plasma rigs salvaged from a forgotten vault. Gap who arrived not in one group, but in four, spread out across the hills, covering each other like a tactical net. They had learned to scout, survive, and ghost through the countryside undetected. From the far south, Peach Bottom, hard as bedrock, survivors who dug their homes into the cliffs and taught their kids how to shoot at age 5. Safe House 52, a mutant-run collective buried beneath the ruins of an old truck stop that had once been a government checkpoint. They brought radiation-refined steel, claws, and raw loyalty to Johnny's cause. And from deep, burned corridors of the Susquehanna Valley, came the strangest group of all. The 12 of Bainbridge silent ghouls wearing pre-war clergy robes, marked with strange old-world symbology, who claimed to have once guarded something beneath the river. They brought secrets, fragments of enclave tech, and warnings. Each group arrived in waves day by day. The gates of Lancaster opened again and again. The field outside the city became a shifting army of tents, machine shops, medical units, training yards, and signal towers. Lancaster wasn't a city anymore. It was a nation being born under firelight. And at the center of it all stood Johnny Vanjik. Watching. Recording. Linking memories from every new handshake. Every new leader. Every whispered story of the enclave creeping in from the shadows. And when they asked, "Why are we here? What comes next?" he didn't give a speech. He just looked toward the Atlantic, where salt hung in the air like the breath of a waiting god. And he said, "We march. We build. And then we burn their home to the water line." The storm clouds over Lancaster had passed, but the fire never left the sky. Johnny stood with Elias alone, atop the battlement overlooking the eastern trench line. Below them, the wasteland stirred with the sound of rebuilding. Tents. Screws. Armor plates re-welded under a flickering moon. It was a city preparing for war. But what Johnny carried now wasn't just war, it was weight. The kind that made your spine ache even when standing tall. And Elias, stoic, sharp, and unshakably grounded, was the only one who needed to hear it. "Elias." Johnny's voice was steady, but his eyes were far away. Locked not on the city, not on the people below, but on the faint glint of ocean light in the distant sky. "I trust you. You kept the city breathing. You held the line when I was gone. So there's something you need to know." Elias said nothing. He didn't need to. He just turned his full attention, silent, ready to shoulder whatever it was. Johnny unclipped the wrist panel of the LC-01, revealing the call sign device dim now, humming in low sleep state, like a lion dozing with one eye open. That enclave bunker wasn't just a black site. It was a grave. They had files classified, buried, scrubbed from every major archive system. Files from before the war. Hell, from before I was even born. They had one, labeled Vanjik. Elias narrowed his gaze, saying nothing but his posture stiffened. Johnny went on. The file was old. Decades old. They had sightings of one man popping up all over the East Coast at the same time. Reports. Night raids. Pre-incident intel leaks. He never changed. Eyes glowing. Survived bullets, chemicals, fire. He was always there when things went wrong. Always there to end it. They couldn't catch him. Couldn't kill him. Until one day, something did. They found his body. They opened him up. And what they found didn't make sense. No oxygen intake. No food requirement. Healing like nothing they'd seen. Strength, vision, senses. Everything enhanced. Elias crossed his arms slowly. So you're biology. Johnny nodded once. Your doctors were right. Project Luminary wasn't what made me. It woke me. I was already built for this, Elias. I already had it. The hive couldn't take me. The FEV couldn't reprogram me. And this. He lifted the device. This is the reason. This is the link. To others. Other versions. A call sign network. A lattice of me's across timelines, across reality. And now I can hear them. He stepped in closer, voice low now. Focused. Private. This device is hard locked to my DNA. You could strap it to 1,000 other wrists and it'll never open. It's damn near immortality. Power. Leverage. A living key to knowledge, time, memory, war. And only I can wield it. Elias looked him over slowly. No judgment. No awe. Just understanding. Johnny continued. We're small in this sea. These other Vanjikis, they're out there. Somewhere. Maybe watching. Maybe waiting. Maybe fighting like we are. But our battle, this legacy, it's ours. It's Lancaster's. It's history now. He extended his arm. I need your men to fuse this device into the suit integrated into the LC-01 directly. No weak points. No risk of it being taken. Tell your best techs. No shortcuts. I want it part of me. And tell your doctors. I want another full round of tests. If this thing is evolving me, we need to know how fast. Then, the steel in Johnny's voice returned. A command. Not a request. But Elias, This does not leave us. Not beyond you, me, and Crag. Not even Milo. Not the other commanders. Not the outer circle. This much truth. It would break the wrong minds. It would collapse the will of the less educated. Turn panic into cults. Loyalty into fear. We don't need that. Elias nodded. It stays between us. He extended his hand. Johnny gripped it, firm. Then let's get to work. Because if we're going to war, it's time I start acting like a weapon. It took 3 full days, and every hour of it was fire-forged work under tight silence, locked within the underbelly of the Brotherhood's fortified lab, once a rail depot, now a sanctuary of engineering brilliance and sealed truths. The LC-01 armor was broken down to its bare spine. Stripped of its outer plates, its radiation siphons laid open like veins. Johnny stood in a reinforced stasis frame as Brotherhood technicians worked around him, weaving the call sign device into the suit's deepest layers. Not just attached, integrated, fed into the armor's biofeedback system and woven directly to Johnny's skin through micro-threaded neural nodes. No ports. No access points. No override. The device was now part of him. All information relayed back to Elias and only Elias. The technicians were hand-selected, sworn under code, and watched every second by Crag, whose presence alone was enough to keep the truth buried deep. "This isn't armor anymore," one of them whispered as the final clamp locked shut. "It's a conduit." Meanwhile, in the lower chamber, the second round of medical diagnostics began. Johnny sat bare-chested under dim light, electrodes laced across his skin, a spider's web of pre-war tech calibrated by minds born long after the bombs fell. The lead doctor was the same one who'd questioned his DNA weeks earlier, now staring at the readouts like she was watching scripture rewrite itself in real time. She leaned in toward Elias and whispered, not knowing Johnny's enhanced hearing caught every word. "Baseline still scans human, but not fully. Something's shifted. Metabolic readings are impossibly stable. He's regenerating even faster than before, but it's subtle now. Controlled. It's like the device fused with his immune system, perfected it. And we scanned dormant portions of his brain activity again. It's lighting up in patterns we don't understand, patterns that mirror data strings from the call sign interface. He's not just thinking. He's receiving." Johnny sat silently, unmoving, staring straight ahead. Not angry. Not afraid. Just aware. His mind was still his own. But now, it wasn't alone. By the time the armor was reassembled, LC-01 had evolved. It moved with his breath, reacted to his focus, glowed with a soft pulse of energy even when idle, like the call sign was quietly listening for a reason to open a door, any door, across any history. The old armor had been forged to survive the wasteland. This new form, it was built to challenge the world that came before it. Elias approached him as he stepped from the surgical bay. "The tests are done. And the suit's yours." Johnny gave a single nod. "Good." He looked down at his hands, flexed his fingers inside the new synth-laced gloves. "Then we're past the point of no return." He glanced toward the Eastern Command Station, where the scouts were loading new fuel cells and maps were being redrawn. "Prep the city. Call the new alliance to the gates. And ready the fleet." He looked eastward, toward the sea. "It's time we drag the enclave out of hiding." The march to the coast wasn't quiet, and it wasn't quick. But it was unlike anything the wasteland had seen in decades. From Lancaster came armored convoys. Converted rail carts pulled by hydrogen-warped Brahmin. Mutants in exoplated freight haulers, ghouls driving stripped-down vertibird chassis welded onto pre-war truck beds. And in front of them all, mounted on a pre-war military motorbike modified for radiation drift and terrain breach, Johnny Vanjik, his LC-01 armor synced perfectly to his body, the call sign interface flickering faintly with course correction data that didn't belong in any timeline. They traveled east for 3 days. Following what remained of the Delaware River corridor, crossing rusted-out bridges, passing silent ruins, pushing through zones where nature had clawed its way back through concrete and glass. Locals in scattered safe houses whispered as the army passed. Some joined. Others wept. Not out of fear. Out of hope they hadn't dared to feel again. On the morning of the 4th day, they reached the Jersey coast, a stretch of broken shore near what was once the outskirts of Atlantic City. The wrecked warship sat half embedded in sand and rubble, tilted starboard, its hull cracked but mostly intact, the remains of a Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser, lost during the early days of the Great War. Its cannons were rusted. The radar dish drooped like a bent spine. But the core superstructure was still whole. Steel, armor, foundation, all of it usable, all of it waiting. They named the site Camp Tempest. A massive crescent-shaped work zone formed around the hull. Salvage tents were set up. Brotherhood scribes established a mobile lab dome near the stern. Ghouls organized metal recovery teams to tear into the fractured hull with thermite lances. Mutants worked as heavy lifters, rerouting power cores and laying down plating across the ship's fractured walkways. Every group readings tacticians, afraid as engineers, Safe House 52's radiation harvesters, GAP scouts found their place. Lancaster was no longer just a city. It was a movement now. Johnny walked the sand-dusted deck of the cruiser late that night, Elias at his side. Below, the lights of Camp Tempest burned steady. We give it time. Get her floating, get her armed, get her sealed. Johnny glanced toward the eastern horizon. Nothing but Black Sea. Then we sail. Elias gave a soft breath. And what if they see us coming? Johnny's eyes glowed in the dark. That's the point. Let the Enclave know the wasteland's coming. Let them see me at the head of it. Let them understand there's no ocean wide enough to hide from what they created. Camp Tempest worked through the night. Steel on steel. Voices shouting over wind. Torches flaring like signal fires to gods long dead. And far off in the deep black of the Atlantic, the enclave's home watched, unaware that the storm had already begun.